It's the middle of November, boat season is winding down, and it's snowing outside. That means it's time to start prepping tackle for next year, and we're going to talk about that on this episode of Fishful Thinker, the podcast. I'm Chad LaChance, and you're listening to Fishful Thinker, the podcast. All things fishful, all the time. Hey, thinkers, Chad LaChance here. Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Fishful Thinker, the podcast. Of course, brought to us, as always, by the fine folks at Sportsman's Warehouse. Visit them at 140 plus stores nationwide or at sportsmans.com. We're heading into Christmas season. Don't forget Sportsman's Warehouse. And also, if you're a Northern Colorado thinker, please consider visiting the fine folks at Peterson Toyota in Fort Collins, Colorado for all of your car needs. Guys, I'm sitting in my office right now here on the beautiful shore of Horsetooth Reservoir in Colorado, and it is snowing to beat the band out there. And I mean snowing for real, and I'm happy to have it. We're always happy to have the moisture. I'm not a big fan of the cold in the wintertime personally. That's what they make Florida for. But at the end of the day, we need the moisture. And I want to say real quick to all of my rancher friends, of which I have lots of here in Colorado, hang in there, guys. They're getting a lot of snow. They need the moisture, and they're working their tails off right now. So hopefully they'll pull through this one and fill up the Ogallala Aquifer for next year's farming season. Like I said, happy to have the moisture. But what it starts doing to me as an angler when I look at this, and we're staring down the barrel of boat ramps closing here in Colorado because of the snow, I started thinking to next year. And I really don't think it's ever too soon to start thinking a little bit ahead. And there's a specific reason why I start working on a bunch of my stuff for next year at this time of year, specifically as we're talking about cleaning the boat up and putting it away for the season. And hey, if you're living in an area of the country where you don't have to do this, as far as put the boat away, some of this is still relevant to you anyway. But for me, the reason I start prepping all my tackle and gear for next year at this time is because right now, while the season is still fresh in my mind, I know what I needed, where my deficiencies were, where my holes in inventory were, where I saw room for improvement in my tackle, or my boat, or anything else for that matter, my gear, my clothing, whatever it might be. Wherever I saw room for improvement, wherever I saw a need to fix something or replenish something, all of that is fresh in my mind right now. And if I wait till spring, maybe I wait till after the holidays, maybe or February, and you start working on your tackle, well, then it's going to have been months since you dealt with it. So if you're a hardcore guy or even a weekender, now is the time, while it's fresh in your brain, to at least make some notes or get some work done as far as getting your tackle prepared. And I figured I'd talk about that on this episode of Fishful Thinker, the podcast, because as a fishing guide for the last 20 years and professional angler and outdoorsman, preparation is one of the biggest keys to being successful day in and day out. If you're a weekend tournament guy, if you're a guide, you probably don't need to listen to this a whole bunch unless you're a new guide. But realistically, if you're a tournament guy, a weekender, recreational angler, and you got a fair bit of tackle, you take the sport kind of seriously, then some of this stuff is definitely going to apply to you. And like I said, I do it now while it's fresh in my mind. And also because we're going to Christmas, and I get it, we're not even to Thanksgiving yet. Somebody's going to crucify me. Don't worry, I don't have a Christmas tree, and there's no Christmas music at my house yet. But we are going into that Christmas season, and there's going to be sales and things like that, and perhaps you want to take advantage of some of that stuff. You're in clearances, pre-holiday sales, all of those things, which they will undoubtedly do at Sportsman's Warehouse, as they do every year. Or wherever you retail your stuff, you can take advantage of it if you know what you need, and you're not buying stuff needlessly that you don't need, or conversely, you're not going to go into next season and find out you're short on something on those first nice days in the boat. So I figured I'd talk about what do I do as I'm starting to empty out my Ranger boat. Now I fish, and if you're not familiar, I fish out of a 21-foot Ranger bass boat, but I also fish out of a small 12-foot Coleman crawdad, and I fish from the bank and other things. So this will apply to all of the above. But specifically today, it's more about emptying the boat and getting my hardcore bread and butter tackle dealt with. So the first thing I do, I already mentioned, is take it all out of the boat. And the boat's fantastic. It's a 21-foot floating tackle box. It holds a lot of stuff. And in my case, there's typically somewhere between about 15 and 30 rods and reel combos in the boat. That could be because I'm guiding, could be because I'm on a multi-species trip, could be just because I'm bass fishing, and bass guys like to carry a lot of rods and reels. But I carry a lot of rods and reels in the boat, each one set up for different things. There's a couple of duplicates. For the most part, the duplicates are for hardcore techniques that I'm going to do a bunch of. For instance, finesse jig rods. There might be 2 or 3 of those in the boat for different styles of finesse jigs that I can go back and forth between on any given day. Keep me from swapping lures so much. But for the most part, each one's rigged to do something differently. So I will take all of those out of the boat and bring them in the shop first. I'll empty all the Plano 3700 boxes, and there is a bunch of those in the boat for any given outing. I've been using the Plano Edge boxes for the last 2 years. I really like those things as well, but whatever box it is that you use, getting them out of the boat and getting them stacked up where you can look at them all in one shot and see them. The thing about the boat is all that stuff's below deck. You can't see it. And getting it all out where you can see it all, spread it out in front of you is a good way to go about doing what I'm talking about doing. So I'll take all that stuff out of the boat, and then any trips that I do for the remainder of the year, and I will still launch the boat a few times for the remainder of the year, but I'll put in specifically what I need just for those outings, because typically as we get towards winter, at least in my case, the fishing gets much more reduced down to what your options are in terms of tackle. So I'll throw a few things back in the boat, but I'll still take advantage of this snowy week to, get a head start on this stuff and take some inventory. So I'll also take any stuff that I put in the boat temporary. Like I typically will have a bag of temporary plastics in the boat, meaning that for a specific outing, like the last outing I took the boat to was a trout specific outing. So I'll have a separate bag that's ancillary that goes in the boat. So the standard stuff stays in the boat all the time, but there's about 10% of the tackle that gets changed out depending on what I'm going to do and where I'm going to go. And so same thing with this here late fall, early winter fishing. It will be a small percentage of tackle that I'll put back in the boat. So I'll get all of that stuff out of the boat. At this point, I'm not going to deal with the boat specific stuff like toolkits, first aid kits, life jackets, throwables, ropes, all the other stuff that I will maintain in the boat over the winter. All of that stuff I'll deal with when the boat is actually put away for the winter, and I'm not doing that yet. I'm just getting a jump start on the tackle stuff. So once I have all the rods and reels in the garage where I can work on them all and get them all out and line them all up where I can see them, then I will immediately start stripping line off anything that's got monofilament on it. And the reason I strip the line off now is to avoid any temptation of grabbing that rod and throwing it in the boat in the spring. They will sit all winter in my shop without line on them. And in my case, most of my reels have backing on them. So I'll strip the top, say 75 yards of line off or 100 yards of line off down to wherever the knot is and leave it there for the winter. That backing will stay on those reels for the most part all winter long. And most of my reels are set up that way as a way to save dollars and also time. I can just tie a new piece of line on right there, wind it on the spool, and again, I'm not using as much stuff. So I'll strip them down to there. Anything with monofilament, anything with fluorocarbon, and let me back up there. The reason anything with nylon monofilament and why that's so important is because it degrades with time. And I've had people tell me at expos for years, oh, I've got old mono, it's fine. Well, if it was 10-pound test and it's been on your rod for a year, and it's been out under normal use, maybe you used it 10 weekends over the course of the year, and it's been out in the sun, it's been wet, then it was in your garage and it got dust on it, and blah, 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 all these things. It dried out, it absorbed UV, it got wet, it dried out again, it absorbed more UV, it got hot, it got cold. Nylon doesn't deal well with those things, and its breaking strength will drastically be reduced in a hurry, and you can tell by looking at it, it will get a milkier color. and it will get a less smooth finish. And so nice fresh monofilament, like I use typically for monofilament, I use one of two things. I either use a Trilene Sensation or an XT. The look of that line when it's new versus when it's a few months old is fundamentally different because of what happens with UV and water retention. So, and it doesn't matter what nylon monofilament you use, that's the case. And so it doesn't age well, and it's fortunately inexpensive by the grand scheme of fishing lines, so you can replace it. So all the nylon monofilament will come off. Fluorocarbon, all my reels are dated, so I know when it went on there and what pound test it is. And any of my fluorocarbon that's been on there more than since about July will come off. I won't leave it on there for a whole year. I'll leave it on there for 6 months. That's about it. So when I spool it in spring, it'll make it to maybe mid-season, and then I'll swap it from there, barring, you know, heavy use on a certain rod or something like that, at which point I might swap it sooner. But fluorocarbon does not absorb moisture, does not absorb UV as much, and therefore it lasts longer. It's a more durable product in terms of just environmental wear and tear, not fishing wear and tear. Fishing wear and tear is a whole different beast, and on a certain rod that maybe I'm pitching and flipping with 20-pound fluorocarbon, I might swap that every day because it's getting beat up and big hook sets and lots of abrasion and things like that. But if it's just say a crankbait rod with 10-pound Trilene 100% fluorocarbon on it, well, that'll probably make it for months before I'll worry about swapping it. So fluorocarbon, I'll look at the date on it, and if it's been on there for more than about half the season, it will also come off and get ready to be replaced. And again, there's backing underneath that. Any of the braided line that's on any of the rods, and that's on a lot of my rods these days, probably 3/4 of them, 2/3 of them anyway, that stuff is bomb-proof durable-wise. So I will basically inspect the first 20 or 30 feet of it like I do every day before I fish, make sure that there's no abrasion on it, any excess wear, making it look fuzzy, anything like that, and then otherwise it will be fine. It does not, it's UV stable, it doesn't absorb water. Even if it does, the drying process doesn't hurt it, and so the braid I don't worry about swapping. But another thing I'll do after the line's all stripped down, and this is important regardless if it's braid, fluorocarbon, or mono, the next thing I'll do is back the drags completely off. I don't want any tension on the drags all winter long. If you loosen the drags on the spinning reels, it allows the flex washer that helps with that drag to retain its natural shape for one, and it keeps the chances of corrosion down a little bit. So back the drags off of everything is another thing that I'll do as part of taking the line off of them. And then from there in the spring, I can redo line and retighten the drags all in one shot. So I'll get the line worked out, and then let's say I have 35 rods, right? And I've checked my line in all of them. Then I will make sure that I have a list together of what line I will need to put back on them. And that goes back to that late, season, late year-end sales, things like that. If I need to buy line, well, the time to buy it is at the very end of the season where I maybe can get it on a deal, or the first of the year. So by knowing what I need, I have a list. I can watch for whatever deals I might need and go from there. Incidentally, if you're going to buy particularly nylon monofilament or fluorocarbon, keep them stored in a cool, not cold, cool, dark, sealed place. So I put them in a big Plano tote, and I leave them in there, and that way they're not subject to as much moisture, they're subject to no light, and they're subject to not as much temperature changes. So I keep them in a storage area that stays more or less between about 37, 38 degrees and about 60 degrees, and therefore the line lasts a long time. So if you're going to store it in your garage, keep dust off it, keep as much air and light off it as you can, and it will last longer. And that's how I make my line last in the garage. Because again, I'll buy it on sale. If Sportsman's has a big sale on line, I'll go buy a bunch of that line now so that I'm ready to go for the springtime. So again, make a list of what line I might need. And then over the course of the winter, maybe not so much right now, Each of my reels will get a good wipe down, a full inspection process, making sure that the lip of the spool on a spinning reel is smooth, there's no dings or nicks on it. Make sure everything is lightly, and I do mean lightly, barely lubricated. I'll use a water displacing agent on any of it that's dirty, in other words, WD-40. Wipe them down with a smooth, clean rag, small amounts of lubricant, like one drop here and there, make a big difference in that stuff over the course of the winter by the time you're ready to use it in spring. But that stuff I don't necessarily do right now. I'll typically do that in the middle of winter when it's really cold and there's nothing going on, and I'll put some music on in my shop and go out there and deal with it. But right now it's more a matter of just getting the line and inventory stuff done. Same thing with the rods, by the way. I'll do a bunch of maintenance on them, but I'll do that more in the middle of winter. Those will get all their guides checked for nicks and wear, bent guides, any damaged reel seats, any blank damage, anything like that. And then here's a good tip for you. If you do have free time and you want to make your rods look really good, get one of those magic erasers in the cleaning section of your grocery store and get it wet, and it does a fantastic job of making the cork on your fishing rods look brand new and feel brand new. So when your cork gets dirty and dried out and yucky from fish slime and kind of gets smooth and hard to the touch, a magic eraser and 1 minute of elbow grease and that cork will feel brand new again. So that's a tip, and I'll do that to all my rods over the course of winter that have cork on them. Cork seems to be a dying thing though on fishing rods these days. We see a lot more EVA and foam and various rubber type grips on rods these days. They're more durable. Having said that, I still love the cork, and Abu Garcia makes a few reels these days with cork handles on them, and I love that. Or Pfluger makes a couple as well. Feels great on your hand. But anyway, not to digress on that. But I'll get the reels all cleaned up, the rods cleaned up, and everything, get that done. But again, that's more middle of the winter stuff. Right now, it's more inventory stuff. So speaking of inventory, when I'm looking at each of my boxes, I'll open each of the Plano boxes and see what's in them, what's missing, what isn't missing. So any hard bait of any kind with any hook damage, I will literally pick up and look at all of them. Any hook damage, any split rings that need to be replaced, any of that stuff will all get inventoried now. I'll start a big pile of crankbaits. I'm not going to fix them necessarily right now. I'm going to take them out of the box they live in and start a big pile of them. And then I know again what I need. What hooks do I need to replace all these? What size split rings do I need to fix anything that's missing there? Along those same lines, what bait am I missing? What lure specifically? So let's say I'm happen to be looking at a box of lipless crankbaits right here. So I'm looking at my Berkley War Pigs, and I can see right now that my half-ounce ones are a little bit lower on inventory, for one, and for two, I'm out of chrome ones. So first thing on the list is going to be the blue over chrome Berkley War Pig in a half-ounce, because it's a standard bait for me. I throw it a lot. Apparently I lost a couple of them this year, and there's a hole in the box where they live. So I will get a couple more of them. But again, it becomes the inventory thing, so that over the next couple of months, I can take advantage of all the market stuff and get everything filled back up. So then in springtime, everything I want is already there. So the boxes will get searched over that way. Hooks, I look at hooks in terms of quantities, same as crankbaits or anything else. Crankbaits, I want 2 of everything. If it's a standard bait for me, I need 2 of them. And so if it's a jerk bait, a crankbait, a lipless crankbait, anything like that, a spinner bait, any kind of a durable bait, I want 2 of each, because it's too easy to lose one and have it be the right bait. So I'll have 2 of each. Anything that's an edge bait, maybe a funky color, something that I use in a specialty application, maybe I only have 1 of each of those, but I want 2 of each of any sort of a hard, durable bait. Along those same lines, I want replacement hooks in stock for my full range of crankbaits. So that might go from, a 1/0 for some great big kind of swim bait style stuff, all the way down to maybe a number 6 or an 8 even on some little tiny trout crankbaits. So I'll keep every size of Fusion 19 treble hook. I'll keep 1 package of each at least, so that I can swap hooks. So when I'm looking at my pile of crankbaits, I can say, okay, well I need as size 6s, I need 15 of them, let's say, just to replenish these baits, well, then I also need an extra box to have on hand for spring. So I know I need to get a couple of boxes of them. So, but again, I have time to do it. If I do it right now, I'm not in a hurry. I'm not running around looking for all that stuff in the spring. So that's what'll happen with hooks. Same thing with worm hooks or bait hooks or anything else. I'm working on a new top secret thing for Berkley right now with dough baits of all the crazy things. I needed specialized hooks for those. So I'll have a bunch of those in place so that I don't run out of them when I need them. And now again is the time to get them. So all my Texas rigs for bass fishing, tungsten sinkers, all that stuff, I need to check and make sure, do I have 6 of these sinkers in each size or 4 of these in each size to make sure that I'm okay to get me through a given day or a given road trip, as the case might be. So I'll make sure I have each of them in size. So I'll make notes, and I literally just have a big giant sheet of paper in front of me. I'll just make handwritten notes on the whole thing. However you make your notes, make them, but I make notes of all the things I need. And then I'll have that list and I'll start cross-referencing that when stuff goes on sale and going from there. But I'll check on all the hooks, all the sinkers, in other words, all the consumable goods, like same with line. It's consumable stuff you go through a bunch of. I will take care of all that. And incidentally, along those same lines can be various other sinkers, split shot, nail weights if you use those for Damiki rigs or whatever. In my case, the shrink tube I use for wacky rigs, anything like that that's consumable, any scents that you might use, if you use any squirt-on scents, anything like that, again, make a list of all the consumable stuff, and then you're ready to go when it comes to springtime. But the first thing with same as any other inventory, is knowing what you have and what condition it's in before you can determine what you need. And the more time you give yourself for the what you need part, the better chance you have of being less of a fire drill, being more accurate, maybe getting 2 or 3 tries at getting everything stocked instead of one big order and then realizing you missed 2 things. Or however it is you go about your stuff. But for me, it gives me time and I can piece it all together and check it off my list as I go. And then, like I said, January, February, then I'll work on the actual durable goods like the rods and the reels and the stuff from in the boat and make sure that it's all squared away in the same way. And then it won't be until maybe the end of February that I'll start putting all that stuff back in a boat, or maybe even March. Typically here in Colorado, it's not until sometime in the middle of March that I can boat. So I'll start putting the boat together maybe 2 weeks before I plan on being able to boat again. But in the meantime, all of that stuff can get worked on. And so now's the time to stock it. In the middle of the winter itself, after the holidays, is the time to actually work on it. And then in early spring is the time to start getting serious about fishing again. So the biggest takeaway from this particular podcast, and I know it's a very simple podcast, but a little bit of his discipline. Right now, do I want to go out and work on tackle? Not really, but it's the time to do it. And I have time to do it. And making those lists, I'm not really a list guy, but it's the only way to be stocked and prepared for real. And if you take the sport seriously and you want to do that and you want to be prepared, this is the easiest way to do it. I'll tell you one more thing. For me, it sounds daunting because there's, if you look at all the rods and reel combos in the garage, there's probably 50 of them. And most people have maybe a half dozen. So for you, the task will be a little easier. It's a longer process for me, but if you're a weekend guy with a half dozen or maybe even a dozen rods, maybe a bass weekend derby guy or walleye guy, okay, well, maybe a little bit easier, but the concept is still the same and the result will be the same, and that is that you will have the most time to spend the least amount of money, get yourself stocked up as efficiently as possible, and be as prepared as you can for spring by getting a jump on it now. And like I said, it's 30 degrees, snowing to beat the bandwagon outside. I'm not going fishing anyway. It's a good time to work on stuff. So appreciate you tuning into this episode of Fishful Thinker, the podcast. Of course, always brought to us by the fine folks at Sportsman's Warehouse and Peterson Toyota. If you guys want to join the conversation at Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok, I'd appreciate that at Fishful Thinker. Hopefully you're tuning in on our YouTube channel and hearing it there, and you're a subscriber, and you'll share it with your friends. But we appreciate you listening. This has been Fishful Thinker, the podcast.